So you mentioned one of them when you talked, you still didn't get it.
Right.
But a lot of the leagues still kind of don't understand the significance of what they were doing. They're like, oh, I just played ball as a kid, and then I went on with my life. And so in terms of like, even if 10 years later, there weren't people talking about that league, or even the women that played in it, there wasn't an idea of like what the significance of that was. So many of the women, even now, still don't kind of understand it, but they get it more so in terms of the overall like significance of what the league was to the overall baseball and sports landscape. But within that kind of break between the end of the league and and really the 90s, I'd say, there was it was lost because so many of the players didn't even talk about what was their own history.
They didn't talk about it, like good Jackie Baumgart. She's a former player, Jackie Manson Baumgart. It's a good friend of both of ours. And when she had 3 sons, and they didn't know she played. She didn't talk about it. But then she had a ball that was signed by all her teammates, and her kids wanted to go out and play with her. And she's like, no, you can't. It's $1,000 on eBay. And then she's like, I used to play professional baseball. And her kids would be like,
they'd laugh
yeah,
at
right.
Yeah. They know who believed the women either. In the 60s and the 70s, I played professional ball. No, you didn't.
I mean, we've all studied Rosie the Riveter in school. I mean, that history was well documented, women at work, and it changed the way our country went to work, World War II. This, unfortunately, didn't continue to change and integrate baseball.
Might have been an East Coast bias, maybe, because it was so isolated in the Midwest.
Because it only happened.
Can I ask what's your motivation for you to get involved in this?
The motivation?
Yeah.
Mostly my love of baseball and history, and I mean, I could spend an hour talking about women in baseball. The fact that, like now, at least 45% of our baseball fans are women, but yet their representation in baseball in all its facets. And I'm not talking about softball, because it's really a different game. There are a lot of women who prefer to be involved in baseball or play baseball. I mean, different reasons. It's a smaller ball.
Yeah, they were overbooked, so
my hand is small. But also just to be involved in it's a better school.
It's history is preserved. I don't grow up playing sports, and I think there's no Title IX. I think I grew up playing soccer in the early 80s, and there were no girls teams, so in a very small facet, I understand that idea of like the growth of a sport and growing a girl's game and that sort of thing. And to me, there's none of that without these women. And so the idea that languished for 50 years before we even decided to talk about it, and that people only know the All-Americans because of the movie, and we can only yell no pride in baseball and 3 other things, and that's what they know about the league and the team. There's so much more to it, and that I get to sit down and talk to these women and learn from them, and the percentage of players is so few. So to me, it's carrying on that legacy, because to me, I don't play sports 10, 20 years ago without those women, so for me, plus I could sort of wear a really cool uniform. I'm a uniform dork, and if you don't think that's the coolest thing ever as a uniform dork, I don't even know. That's a very small percentage of it. But yeah, to me, it's the total history. I don't see how you can be a female baseball fan and not, to get to sit down with these women and talk to them and be able to. I told Jackie that she asked me the same question, and we said we could talk about this for an hour. And like seriously, it's so cool when we get to talk to them. And I told her I wanted to tell her story, and she told me it was my story now too, which is like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So the fact that it's an honor and a privilege to be able to carry that on.
How many of these women are still alive?
3 left on the Chicks.
On the Chicks.
Yeah. I don't know if we have any numbers from the players. They still have a Players Association going. The All-American Girls League website is run by the Players Association, but
you can be an associate
you can
member.
Become a member.
But there's not a lot of numbers.
So the living, it's a couple hundred. When they have a union, most of the living members are still there. So
yeah, there were about 600 players. There are only really about maybe a little over 100 left. It's dwindling.
It's the generation. It's the World War II generation that's dwindling.
So we had a reunion in Chicago last summer, and it was something like 85% of the living players were there. Right.
So yeah, it's getting tough, and some of them are incapacitated. I mean, Jackie Manson Baumgart, who has done a lot of presentations. She had a stroke last January. She cannot articulate anything anymore. Loves it when we visit, but you can't communicate with her anymore, unfortunately. So yeah, it's getting tough. If you ever want to see a really, really good display and see a lot of memorabilia archives, go to South Bend, the Northern Indiana Center for History is the official repository. Obviously the Smithsonian and some other places in the Hall of Fame have some nice items also, but that is the place to visit, so if you get to South Bend, you some time.
And that's their archive.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I read an article recently where they were talking about the world record for a baseball throw by a woman, and they concluded that the longest baseball throw record they could find was 296 feet by Babe Dietrichson, the Olympic athlete in 1931. And I just wondered about the players in the AAGPL. You know, did they ever have any competition like that, or how far could they throw baseball?
Not that I've ever read. I mean, they had a lot of ladies that did play other sports. As an example, Doris Tetzloff was a state speed skating champion in 42 or 43 it was. I've seen 2 different references. But I never read that they had any kind of competitions like that during the season. They may have, but I've never read about that. Good question. Thank you. Yes?
Just wondering, did they have any All-Star games?
Yeah.
Yeah, they played at Wrigley. They played the All-Star game.
The All-Star game? Yeah.
Yeah, the Wrigley Field game wasn't an all-star game, but it was against South Bend, if I remember right. But yeah, some of the seasons they did. Or they'd be viewed as a preseason type thing. Especially later, I mean, 1948, there were 10 teams in the league. That was the high point. That's when Springfield and Chicago were in it. Just like Milwaukee and Minneapolis, Chicago was a one-year wonder. Maybe because they had the Chicago League there already.
What year was that league in Chicago? Were they playing in Chicago?
That was also mid to late 40s. There are people that are starting to write history up on that league because it was a professional league too. A lot of the All-American Girls League players went there, or actually jumped there, so to speak, because of a better contract, and then some came back, and some stayed. But because it was all in Chicago, they would work day jobs, and it was pretty much their employer that sponsored the team, so it was professional. Buck Weaver was actually a manager in that league, and the Bidwell family also had an interest in the league. So St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Arizona Cardinal, but way back in Chicago Cardinals and NFL. So yeah, a lot of connections.
Someone's doing a documentary on it. Adam Chu, he's been working on it like for years.
Yeah.
But that might be coming out.
Sure, interesting story. Same thing, kind of a lost part of history that mostly people are trying to recover. Great, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.